Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajat Lee for the Left Hook Substack, where I invited subject matter expert who is far smarter than me to talk about one big or more than one big question in 30 minutes or less. And today I have my chai because Ramadan has ended, and my friend Allison Gill for the first time. You know Allison, you love Allison. She's the host and executive producer of like 1,000 awesome podcasts, but she is the host of the Webby award-winning podcasts, Mueller, She Wrote, The Daily Beans, Cleanup on Aisle 45 and Aisle 47, and Unjustified. She's also the editor and author of an excellent Substack, The Breakdown, which is at www.muellershewrote.com. I will, of course, link to all of these fine podcasts and Substack, but I've invited her today, and the timing is quite auspicious, to ask the big question: how should Americans resist the authoritarian Trump regime? And everything that I just said right now, I said very deliberately: resist the authoritarian Trump regime. And Allison, as we're recording this, it's 2:06 p.m. Cory Booker has not slept. I think he has 6 more hours to go to break the filibuster record of Senator Byrd, who last time I remembered, he was filibustering for segregation. Cory Booker here. It would be kind of amazing if a black senator from New Jersey would break the epic record. I think was 26 hours of Senator Byrd. And Cory Booker is doing a pretty fantastic job, well prepared. And what he's doing, for folks who aren't following, is since yesterday, we're recording this again Tuesday afternoon, he has been on a tear filibustering, saying, I'm going to go until literally my body collapses, warning Americans about what the Trump regime is doing, the lies, the corruption, the constitutional crises, how he has betrayed you. So the big question was, how should Americans resist? And fate gave us this. Let's talk about what Cory Booker's doing right now. Do you think it's effective?
100%. As to quote the NBA announcer when I was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, watching the NBA finals, Booker, like that, like that, there was their version.
Boone!
Like, I just have that rolling in my head again. And I know there's all this sort of parsing about what technically a filibuster is, and when he started, and a lot of people are saying, well, he's not protesting one single thing, but actually he's disrupting the business of the entire Senate as he does this. So I think it's like a super filibuster, but he is hours away. And these are the kinds of things that for months we've been like, where are our Democratic leaders? Where are they? Do something. And we know they're limited, like they're in the minority, so they can't issue subpoenas in Congress. They can't form committees to have hearings like a Benghazi style thing for Signalgate or whatever. But this is something that they can do, and they're doing it. And I'm just so thrilled that they're listening. And I think that that's the one of the keys to defeating the Trump regime is not to necessarily vote for electeds that agree with you on 100% of the issues, but it's to vote for electeds that will hear you out when you disagree with them and not put you on a plane to El Salvador to rot in a prison camp. So, I mean, there are several things that we can talk about, but this breaking front and center as we're recording this is one of them, because a lot of eyes are on this. It's getting a lot of coverage. I wish it was being played on
Yeah.
a major network. It's not. They're covering it. They're mentioning it. I would like to see it streamed, but this is kind of where we are, and these are the things that we need to get creative about. And I'm happy to see Senator Booker doing this.
You know, you mentioned something about disruption. I think that's a very key point because he's disrupting. He is throwing sand in the gears of an authoritarian regime. He's making it harder. Let's unpack that a bit, Allison, because I don't think, not everyone is as nerdy as you and me. Resistance takes on many forms. There's that quote attributed to Churchill: survival is victory, right? In Dunkirk, and I know people want this like epic battle cry, like, Avengers Assemble, but it doesn't work like that, unfortunately, especially when, you mentioned this right before we recorded. It's no longer a coup. The coup worked. The regime is in power. So you have to weaken and chip away at the regime. I think people are looking at that one, Thor goes and aims for the head for Thanos. It doesn't work that way. Talk about the power of disruption, these death by 1,000 cuts approach.
Yeah, that's why I have a nonprofit called FedOath, where we help give resources to federal workers who have been wrongfully terminated to file and file and file and file, either with the National Labor Relations Board or the Merit Systems Protection Board. We have two people who, Gwen Wilcox and Kathy Harris, who were fired from those boards, suing to get their jobs back. I have filed a lawsuit. MSW Media has filed a lawsuit against Doge for a Freedom of Information Act request. I sent, what was it, on February 11th, a Freedom of Information Act request to Doge for some emails and never heard back. So now we're suing in court with national security counselors and the First Amendment Coalition. These kinds of things. And again, I want to emphasize the courts will not save us. We have to do that. But the courts are one of the multiple vehicles that we have to disrupt this regime, like the filibuster or the marathon speech, whatever you want to technically call it, that Cory Booker is doing, suing in the courts, standing up and having these very focused rallies, like the Tesla takedown this past March 29th, which is getting a lot of good coverage on like Maddo, for example, or the empty chair town halls. I hosted one for Daryl Issa. We had over 800 people show up.
Mm.
People are angry. People want to express their disdain for what unelected Elon Musk is doing to the government. And I think that I mean, like I said, it's us, right? You and I have talked about this for years. We talked about this in 2020, leading up to 2020, where I hosted a whole podcast on the Mueller investigation. I'm like, I hope they don't run on the Mueller investigation. We need to, no single person is going to save us. And then people expected Merrick Garland to come in and save us, but the Supreme Court swooped in and screwed that whole thing up. And everyone was like, what happened? I don't understand. And now people are expecting the courts to save us. Everybody kind of wants to sit at home and have somebody else save us from this regime, but it has to be us. And so when we use the courts, when we use protests, when we use our First Amendment rights, when we use the filibuster, when we urge our elected officials to push out old leadership that might not be
Mm.
doing the jobs that we want them to do the way that we want them to do it, that is how I think, I mean, we can talk about all these different ways, but that's how we disrupt.
And I want to break it down for the sake of this conversation and to give people a kind of clear path of what you can do and should do and what you shouldn't do. And I want to break it down as you were talking about courts and judges, politics, media, and the people. So because we're talking about Cory Booker, let's talk about politicians, what to do, what not to do. Cory Booker, I agree with you. You know what? I've been critiquing Democrats a lot because they deserve it, but when people do good, I give them their flowers. I posted, well done, Cory Booker. I hope you break the record. I think it's symbolic. I think it's meaningful. And you know what? The dog from Up, that's the media. Squirrel, squirrel. They're keeping it in the news. Compare Cory Booker, what he's doing, AOC is doing, Bernie's doing, Senator Murphy's doing, right? If I'm forgetting some people, pardon me, Jasmine Crockett,
Yeah.
to Schumer.
Mm-hmm. You want me to compare
Yeah,
them?
yeah, please
Oh.
tell me, because Schumer says, no, I'm just, because if you don't mind, I'm talking about resistance, right? So Schumer says, and this is a recap, listen, folks, it was the best of two bad strategies. I voted along with 9, Democrats to help the Republicans keep the government, from being shut down. And he did a complete 180, folks. He on Tuesday, when this was happening, Democrats are united. Wednesday, 180, folks. Throw them under the bus. And I believe, not a conspiracy theory, you just follow the money. I believe some donors said, it's in New York, it'll hurt the stock market, do it. And then Chuck Schumer then went to go promote his book. And then he canceled the book tour because people are pissed off. And he's going with the Carville type of strategy that Democrats should play possum and do the right thing. And then you have people saying, F that, it's a brand new ball game. Civility doesn't work. You can't sit there and drink gin with these people and pat them on the back. You have to resist, and you have to be like Jasmine Crockett and say F you. Your take.
All right. Going back to, and I'm sure this goes back further, but when I started to really kind of sit up and get my hackles up about Schumer was when he buried a bill in a committee that ended up getting what, like gutted and folded in, subsumed into the NDAA. It was a bill called the Military Justice Improvement Act. It had 67 sponsors in the Senate. 67 people were willing to vote yes on this bill. And what it would have done would be taken the decision to prosecute rape in the military out of the hands of the commanders who are in the chain of command and out into a civilian thing. And for some reason, him and I think Jack Reed decided it would be best if we didn't go ahead and bring that to the floor to a vote. This is when we had the majority in the Senate. But something more recently that you're talking about with this continuing resolution that he helped get cloture on,
Mm.
it was personally insulting because for a couple of years there, when we had the majority, and we were pushing them to nuke the filibuster so that we could pass voting rights, we could codify Roe, we could do all these things. Schumer would wag his finger at us and say, "We're going to need that filibuster someday. You don't want to nuke that. We're going to need that filibuster. You don't understand how things work, young lady. We're going to need that someday." And the day came when we needed it, and he folded.
Yep.
And to me, that's just personally insulting. Like, that was our chance. And I know that there's some good debate out there about whether a shutdown would be worse than the continuing resolution. I personally side with unions and multiple Democratic senators, 35, I believe, who voted against cloture. The federal workforce was actually against this continuing resolution, even though they were risking being furloughed. I stand with all of them in that it is worse that we now have this that we passed this bill, this continuing resolution. And so I don't know, it's just kind of insulting. But you know me, back in June, July, I was like, everybody shut up about Biden. Just stop, stop with the he's old, stop with the whatever. We're 3 months from an election. Let's not screw this up 3 months. Can I say the F word on here?
Yeah, you can say anything.
Let's not fuck this up 3 months before the election. It is now post-election. Okay, so timing is important. If you're going to go after your leadership to improve, to reform your party, to include more progressive ideals, I mean, we went way moderate in 2024,
Didn't
and we
work.
kind of didn't slide that window open to progressives. And whatever, people have different reasons for why we lost 2024, but regardless of why, going forward, we need to include and welcome more progressive voices into the party without abandoning the center. Like, people think that somehow that will abandon the center, but
It won't.
anyway, I feel like
What's your take on Newsom then?
I'm so mad at him right now. I don't. The people defending him confuse me. You're going to platform. Some people were like, why are you so mad that he's going on these right-wing podcasts to spread his democratic values to right-wing listeners? I'm like, he did not go on right-wing podcasts. He invited
There you go.
rural Nazis onto his podcast. And what's the old saying? If you've got 9 Nazis at a table and you're sitting there, you're a Nazi. Like, why would you platform these guys?
And not only that, Allison, what conservatives said, I don't know if you saw the aftermath of Gavin Newsom. I'm glad for those who don't know, Gavin Newsom started a podcast, and he's the one who invited Charlie Kirk as his first guest. And then he's the one who invited Steve Bannon as his second guest. Steve Bannon on the podcast repeated the lie that Donald Trump won the election, no pushback from Newsom. And Charlie Kirk, said what he had to say, the usual nonsense against trans and this and that, trans people. And a conservative influencer said, wow, Charlie Kirk didn't bend an inch. In fact, Gavin Newsom was the one who conceded points. So what happened? The Overton window shifted what? To the right.
Mhm.
And conservatives are seeing this as a victory of Gavin Newsom, the progressive governor of the progressive California, bending the knee, moving to the right. And what did Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon give up, Allison? Nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lesson there. Okay, we talked about politics, what to do, what not to do. I agree with you. Schumer, Newsom, that model ain't going to work, folks. And you've seen their approval ratings tank. Let's talk about media. As we're discussing this, another breaking news from like just 2 days ago. White House press correspondence dinner happens every year in DC. It's disgusting. There's like thousands of parties. I've been invited to a few. It's gross. You're not missing anything, folks. White House press usually invites a comedian. Allison, you and I are old enough to remember this comedian comes and roasts people without fear or favor. They roasted George W. Bush. They roasted Bill Clinton. That's what they do. They had Amber Ruffin. Amber Ruffin was the comedian who was gonna roast, well, everyone. And because Donald Trump and MAGA were upset that Amber Ruffin is very critical of the Trump administration, at the last second, the White House correspondents, the Press Correspondents Association, announced no comedian. And even though she was booked, she's now canceled. And now they're going to have, I don't know, some speaker. They bent the knee to Donald Trump. While this is happening, you have The Atlantic doubling down on its coverage of Signalgate, forcing the administration for the past 2 weeks to essentially reveal its own recklessness and incompetence. How should the media be resisting, Allison?
Not by obeying in advance, like the White House Correspondents Association did. It's funny, when I successfully joined the White House Correspondents Association in 2023. I wasn't fundraising that year. If you're fundraising or you're part of a PAC or whatever, you aren't allowed to be in the White House Correspondents Association. And I got pushback from some people who called the head of the White House Correspondents Association, welcoming committee or whatever, dean of admissions, I don't know what they're called, and claimed that I was very political. The people who complained were the correspondents from OAN and Newsmax.
That's hilarious.
And I had to sit in almost like an oral dissertation situation and answer questions about my politicization of the news. I eventually was accepted. I stayed in the White House Correspondents Association for that year, and then in 2024 I resigned because I was going to start raising money for Biden-Harris. Now,
what you just told me is so wild that you had to go and endure that grilling while Tim Pool, who was allegedly one of these people who got paid through Tenet Media to promote Russian talking points, is in the press pool. And Marjorie Taylor's boyfriend is in the press pool and is the one who asked Zelensky, how come you're not wearing a suit? These people are fine, but Allison Gill is too political. Sorry, continue.
No, yeah, but it's the obeying in advance. It's the not even waiting until Trump tells you to fire Amber Ruffin. You just go ahead and do it ahead of time. What I carry it with me on tyranny. Timothy Snyder. Number 1, I believe, chapter 1, do not obey in advance, right? It's right there. Chapter 2 is defend institutions, which I did for forever during the first Trump administration. I think I was the first person to make the FBI pop culture aware, like to turn it into a pop culture phenomenon. But yeah, that's what's disappointing. And we've seen a lot of capitulation in the press. Disney, ABC, Paramount, 60 Minutes, like all of this, like reaching out and saying, hey, you remember when we were suing you? Or remember when you were suing us and we totally would have kicked your ass in court? Well, instead, we're going to just give you $40 million.
Yep.
And it's, again, we talked about the politics. Now we're talking about the media. It's fascinating. A while back when Maddo put out her first Ultra podcast, she came on Nicole Wallace and said, look, there's no magic bullet here. Going back to the past, we had a group of journalists that stood up against the Nazi movement in the United States. We had politics. We had the courts. We had the Department of Justice and the rule of law. There's no one specific thing. It's all of those things working together. But then Judge Luttig, super conservative judge,
Yep,
reminded us in the immunity hearings and in his fight to get Trump disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment because he committed an insurrection, said, look, the single biggest check on the executive is voters. And so that's kind of where I stand. And I just wanted to add that I know there's a lot of people out there dooming and glooming, saying, oh, haha, that's really funny that you think we're ever going to have elections again. We just had one last week where we flipped a Trump plus 15 district in a state Senate seat in Pennsylvania. We had one in Iowa where we flipped a plus 21 Trump district in a state race. We've got elections going on in Wisconsin today as we record this.
Florida.
And we've got 2 in Florida for House seats. so scary to the Trump administration that they pulled Elise Stefanik, the third, in New York, which
Replaying the world's smallest violin for Elise Stefanik. Oh, she was so sad.
I hope she burned every bridge when she had senioritis, walking out of the Congress like, I'm gonna be the ambassador, and like was just a complete jerk, and now she has to stay. I hope that, I wish that for her. But those are the kinds of things that we have to focus on, but we also have to remember that we are the government, not them. We're the government. And that's why the coup is complete and we're now in a regime, is because now those 10 rich guys are the government and we have to take it back from them.
I was going to ask about judges and lawyers, but you talked about the people. We'll end on judges and lawyers, but let's talk about the people, because so many folks, Allison, I'm sure when they talk to you and they talk to me, they say, listen, man, you got, like, you host a show, you're on a podcast, you can write for the New York Times, you got people following you. Who am I? I'm nobody. I'm just an average Jose and Jane. So I'm just going to sit here and freak out as I see the comet heading towards Earth. What can the people do? Because I always tell folks, at the end of the day, we have the numbers. MAGA does not have the numbers, Allison. We have the numbers. And if the numbers can organize and unite, a lot of good can happen. It won't happen overnight, but this is a country that was built on revolution. Let's be honest. The Boston Tea Party, no taxation without representation. This is a country with 340 million people, right? And we have seen that this is an extremely incompetent, reckless, idiotic, destructive regime, administration that is going after people's social security now, that is engaging in a trade war, that doesn't care about, I don't know, measles, doesn't care about the price of eggs. Literally, Donald Trump said, I don't care, in his first interview with Hannity.
He
What
actually
can the
said he
people do?
couldn't care less, and I was impressed that he used couldn't properly.
What can people do?
Well, that's why I like this piece by JVL. I think it's in the Bulwark.
Yes, in
Uh,
the bulwark.
about how we have these rallies, we have these town halls, we have these Tesla takedowns, we have these AOC Bernie rallies out away from the center of the government. We start there. We start now. We have started now. We get everybody's email. We get it. We build a base. And then come summer 2026, all millions of us go to where the center of the government is, the seat of government, New York, Washington, D.C., et cetera. And I think that that's a really a good plan. Another thing I'm reminded of, I was trying to write a book a while back about the media, and it didn't get picked up because it was critical of the media, and no media would have me on to talk about my book, Critical of the Media. So I've been publishing chapters here and there on my Substack for free. Um, but I interviewed you for that book, and you and I talked about a movie called Pump Up the Volume.
Yes.
And, it's this little story about a town where a kid gets in his basement and goes on a pirate radio and high school kid and talks to his high school friends about the real issues that they're facing and stuff and the parents are like, no, you're disrupting the status quo. And they're trying to find him and triangulate him and locate him. And at the end of the movie, he ends up in a mobile Jeep with the Eat Me, Beat Me lady, and he's broadcasting live, and he ends up in the school football field, and everybody's out there with their cars blasting his show on their radios. And his final speech at the end is like, pick up a microphone, steal the air, talk hard. And then they unplug him and there's a squeal and then they take him off to jail. And I'm like, yes. And so I just encourage everybody to tell your stories, grab a microphone, grab a pen, get a blog, whatever the 2025 analog is for, a ham radio, pirate radio from your basement in the 80s. And get your stories out there, meet, organize. And when you organize, get everybody's contact information so that when you organize next time, you have everybody plus, and then again, everybody plus. And then we move in the next year and a half into a giant show of force. And I don't mean like a January 6th show of force. I mean a peaceful protest to air our grievances under the First Amendment at the Capitol, which I think JVL said could draw out, military opposition or martial law or the invocation of the Insurrection Act or calling us a anarchic jurisdiction like he did in his first term,
Enemies from within.
which allowed Bill Barr to go out in unmarked vans and scoop people up and disappearing them. That's already happening now. So we going back to Mahmoud Khalil and then everybody who's followed since, they're trying to take away our due process. But I think that's probably a good way to do it. And then also on the Daily Beans, I have a good trouble segment where I give a little assignment. Last Tuesday, it was to call Josh Kaul, the Wisconsin Attorney General, and tell him to do something about Elon Musk trying to buy votes in Wisconsin. He did. 3 days later, he sued. He lost, but he tried. And so I think there's
At
tiny.
least it's in the news. At least it's in the news, right? Like people know about it. Caroline Levitt's being questioned about the tariff. She's being questioned about Signalgate. She's being questioned about, hey, why is it okay for allegedly George Soros to give money, but Elon Musk? It's not okay for George Soros to give money, but Elon Musk can buy the presidency. I want to end on a sober note. We've talked about it throughout, but the power, the necessity of judges and lawyers who are willing to fight and not bend the knee. And this is coming on the heels of another kind of breaking news of the past 12 hours, where the Atlantic published this horrifying story about a Maryland father who was given withholding of removal, who has a citizen wife, who is the father of a 5-year-old citizen daughter with disabilities, who was accidentally picked up, like so many other brown men, and sent to El Salvador, the country which he left because he was afraid of being prosecuted. He got withholding of removal because he said, if I go back to El Salvador, they'll kill me. He's now in El Salvador. The Trump administration initially admitted that they made a mistake, but oopsie, J.D. Vance, the vice president, lied about him being a gang member because apparently reading comprehension is not taught in Ivy League schools. And Levitt doubled down. And this is in addition to, Allison, like you said, Mahmoud Khalil, the pro-Palestinian activist, zero crimes, who is detained right now. Rumeysa Ozturk, the woman that you mentioned, we saw the chilling video of masked men picking this woman up, detaining her. Her crime, folks. She is a national here legally. She co-wrote an op-ed at Tufts talking about divestment from Israel. And I don't know if you saw yesterday this just grotesque quote from Jesse Waters and Greg Gutfield on Fox, where Jessica Tarlov brought up the fact that there's an innocent gay barber in one of these prisons being probably tortured in El Salvador. And Waters says, it's just a gay barber. As this is happening, the people who should stand up are lawyers, law firms. And we know that there are law firms being bullied, targeted by Trump as of this writing, saying, we don't like the people that you've hired, so we're going to go after you. Paul Weiss bent the knee, Skaden bent the knee, lawyers and judges, maybe because I'm a recovering attorney, I still have hope. As a bulwark, as one of those last means of protection, what should they be doing right now?
What they're doing plus more. At first they shouldn't. People like Paul Weiss, Skadden Arps. Paul Weiss was like, "Hey, I'll give you $40 million if you leave us alone," and Skadden Arps was like, "Oh yeah, we got $100 million that says that you will leave us alone."
We'll do pro bono work for you in your illegal regime shit.
Yeah, like that's and people are resigning left and right, which I appreciate. That's one thing that I'm looking for. But yeah, this is it's disgusting. I mean, the paperwork that was filed in court to show the checklist for what ICE is using to determine whether someone or not is Trend or Aragua, the tattoo photos that they have, the gang tattoo photos that they have, it's actually been found that they were ripped from Instagram tattoo artists' pages in UK from 10 years ago.
Mm.
One of the photos of a tattoo with a clock on it in that ICE paperwork is a white dude named Pete living in Sussex. Like it's beyond disgusting, the lack of due process. And that's why I appreciate law firms like Democracy Forward, Democracy Docket, Mark Elias's law firm, national security counselors, ACLU, like actually not folding and going forward and suing for these folks to get due process. I don't know how else to put it other than it's the poem. First they came for, then they came for. It's exactly that. And if you think that you're not next, I have a bridge to sell you.
No, it is Father Niemöller's poem, and those who thought you and me were being hyperbolic the last few years, I hope these last 2 weeks, even the last 2 days, if you've been paying attention, white Canadian woman was detained, Filipino woman is detained,
German guy.
students are being straight up kidnapped, innocent fathers are straight up being kidnapped and deported to a foreign country to be tortured, and this regime is going to go after anyone and everyone, law firms, Republicans. Mike Pence is like one of the whitest, most Christian conservative men on earth. And at the last second, thanks to taking advice from Dan Quayle, folks, and Justice Luttig, whom you mentioned, he asked, hey, what should I do? And Quayle and Luttig said, do your job, certify the election. And then we all see the videos on January 6th with Mike Pence running for his life. If they're going to go after Mike Pence, look at me and Allison. Do you think we're safe? No.
No. Yeah, and it's
Allison,
all
I thank you so
Waj,
much for your time. I kept you a little bit longer, but you know, I wanted people to have a type of a robust understanding of some concrete things that they can do to resist. And you were the perfect guest. You've been doing the good work, God's work, democracy's work for several years. Please shamelessly promote yourself.
before I do that, I just want to say, gosh, Waj, if only we had an historic analog where we could learn of the terrors of deporting others to foreign soil, into concentration camps. If only there was something we could learn from.
If only we could imagine. If only.
Yeah, boy, we're just starting from scratch here.
I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, you mentioned that, but look, folks, Allison's not being hyperbolic. Check out Kristi Noem's vile photo video op with a $50,000 gaudy Rolex watch as she was in front of these tiers of gang members in El Salvador, and then compare those photos and videos to what literally the Nazis released as they were giving these bold speeches next to prisoners of war in concentration camps. Sorry, but
No,
I'm
yeah,
glad you mentioned that.
the Rolex watch was a nice touch, considering one of the people in the cage behind her is in prison because he has attached the Rolex
Of course.
logo tattooed on his forearm. Definitely Tren de Aragua, even though all the experts say they don't have any tattoos or gang signs or certifications of membership, which would be funny, like if you had it on your wall, like certified member of Tren de Aragua. That's something that they're
You get a diploma.
So you can find me anywhere on social media, Mueller She Wrote. Please listen to the Daily Beans if you want something little that you can do, easily doable every day. It's in our Good Trouble segment. You can listen to Andy McCabe and I on Unjustified. We talk about what Trump's doing to the Justice Department and the FBI and the other intelligence agencies. And then former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn and I host the podcast Cleanup on Aisle 45. Check that out. MSWmedia.com is where you can find it all. And my Substack is MuellerSheWrote.com if you're into that. Everything is free. All my content is free.
Yeah, Allison and I are terrible capitalists. We don't believe in paywalls. My dad, I don't know if your family calls you. My dad calls me every day and goes, please, please, add a pay. Why? And I'm just like, the people need good information. I can't help it.
Yeah, people are like, how much money are you leaving on the table? And I'm like, but I don't want to leave any information off the table. That's
Allison is leaving a lot of money on the table, folks. So please support her. She's been doing great work. Please support The Left Hook. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajat Ali for The Left Hook Substack. As always, be good, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and please, oh please, don't be a fascist. Take care.